Welcome to the Sam Sorbo Show. Welcome back, I should say. I'm joined now by another guest. Amber Northern is a Senior Vice President for Research at the Thomas B. Fordham Institute. She supervises the Institute's studies and research staff, but she's also published in areas of educational accountability, principal leadership, teacher quality, academic standards, among others. And we're here to talk about some academic standards because Fordham just released a significant new report called The State of State Standards for Civics and U.S. History in 2021. So it's quite up to date. Amber, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for, first of all, thank you for being here, but also thank you for doing this because we need to have a way of holding people accountable. We can't hold them accountable if we have no idea how effective they are being at their jobs, right?
Right, that's exactly it.
And so what are the state civics and U.S. history standards? Let's start there.
Yeah, so we have 5 states or jurisdictions across the country that received an A, and we can talk obviously about what that means in a minute. And so the vast majority, 20 states, had D's or F's. In one or both subjects. And then you had the critical mass in the middle with a bunch of mediocre C's. So there is a lot of room for improvement in terms of what states require their kids to know in U.S. history and civics.
Okay, so it's only looking at the standards that the state imposes for each of their sort of departments of education, right?
Right. We're not looking at curriculum. Some people will get those a little bit confused, but the curriculum are what the teachers do on a day-to-day basis. We're looking at what state policymakers and state boards of education are requiring their kids to know and be able to do.
And so you said that there were several that passed the test. Where were they? Let's talk about that.
We have Tennessee, Alabama, California, the District of Columbia, and Massachusetts are the 5. And I've been telling folks those are both red and blue states. So this is not a red or a blue thing. If folks want to write accurate and factual standards in these 2 subjects, it can be done if people have that goal in mind.
And so give me an example of what a standard might be and how somebody could either achieve it or fail to achieve it.
Sure. So, I mean, basically the standard has to be detailed. So in other words, it can't be a global thing like, study the role of government in creating and enforcing policies. Like that just means nothing, right? Because it's just not specific at all. But if you have a standard that says, study the role of slavery in the cause of the Civil War, and how it, led to infighting across our country, or you actually name a cause, you actually name a war, then that's where we're headed in the right direction. So we want to see standards actually name people, places, or events, and not be abstract or mushy.
Okay, so that's great. So now I have an idea of what the standards are. So just because the state has those standards doesn't mean that the schools are actually living up to the standards, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, this is the problem with mushy standards, that you just don't give districts any chance of being able to select a curriculum that would build upon those standards and strengthen them. And so, it's a roadmap, it's guidance, it's not, overly prescriptive. It's just saying, here's what we're going to lay out this broad, book of what we think kids should know and be able to do. And then you fill in all the chapters, you fill in all the details. But if you've got a crummy roadmap, it's really hard to then adopt a curriculum that then builds upon that roadmap if the roadmap is taking you nowhere.
So in fact, if a state had crummy standards and got an F grade from the Fordham Institute, it's possible that the schools are still teaching really great. Like the school could actually be teaching a great thing because the school would then obviously not be adhering to the standards, or if the standard was broad enough and the school said, no, we're going to do better than that, then that's perfectly adequate, or, it might be perfectly adequate, but that's not the typical, right?
Right. I mean, at least, we think they have a much better chance of getting it right if the standards are clear and detailed than if the standards are vague and amorphous. But you're absolutely right. If you've got a great superintendent who values, content knowledge and critical thinking skills and all these things, and teachers have great professional development and training, they can certainly take crummy standards, and make lemonade out of lemons. But that's certainly not what we want the status quo to be. We'd much rather go ahead and give them something strong and high quality to begin with, and then take it from there.
Right. I mean, at that point, the question is why is the state less interested in the proficiency of the student for civics and U.S. history, right?
Right.
And
exactly.
so let's talk about that. What is the importance of students understanding U.S. civics and U.S. history?
So, I mean, I like to give people this factoid. So we actually do have a national test, and it takes place every 4 years, and we test kids on what they know in U.S. history and civics. The last time we did it was in 2018. We had 15% of 8th graders who were proficient in U.S. history.
Okay, define proficient.
Proficient means, you met the lowest bar for passing the test.
And how low is that bar?
So this would be things like, name the 3 branches of government and know what they do. So this is not exceedingly,
right, but there's a metric, right? What is the metric that defines proficient? Because my understanding, at least in, I believe it was the state of Ohio, proficient was getting 38% of the questions correct on the exam.
Right. So on the national test, this is a national test. So the NAEP, a national organization, they actually set the bar for proficiency. So it's actually been studied, and the proficiency bar on NAEP is fairly rigorous. It's not as low as some of these other states that you're alluding to. That said, 15% is still low, obviously. And then in civics, it's not much better news. In 2018, we had barely a quarter of 8th graders who were proficient in civics. And where does this all add up? I mean, then let's look at what the adults know. And this has often been the topic of, late night comedy, but it's not so. Only half of adults, I think it's 48%, not even half, can name all 3 branches of government. And basically 60% know the year in which we obtained our independence. So for 40% of Americans, 1776 doesn't ring a bell.
Not even the Liberty Bell. Oh, did I just say that? That's very sad. And in fact, it's part of why one of my talking points for self-teaching, or as I now refer to home education, is this idea that the government should not be involved in our teaching. It should not be involved in education at all, because there's a distinct conflict of interest with the government supposed to be teaching students that the power resides with the populace and not in the government. And the government is not teaching students that. The government is teaching students that government has the answer.
Right. And I mean, and if we know our Constitution, right, we know that it gives the role of education to the states. And honestly, again, it's really up to the local school districts to take the standards and make them work for kids. And so if you as a state, you completely abdicate your responsibility in laying out guidelines, it just becomes even harder for the local districts to get it right. And we're not saying, again, that these things have to be super detailed, like this is what teachers teach on 4th period, on January 18th or whatnot. We're just saying, give them the parameters to be able to take them and run with them.
And give them the test so they know what they're teaching to. I'm kidding.
Kids are taught, the Civil War, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, both World Wars. I mean, if you hit the nuts and bolts, they're going to do fine on that test.
Right, for sure. The other thing that you're bringing up, so I just had on a gal who is part of Moms for Liberty, and they have an organization where they're encouraging moms to go and talk to the school boards and go to the school board meetings and insist on the proper curriculum and get CRT out of our schools, for instance. That's a big one. We also have the 1619 project, also the LGBTQ plus agenda, and all of that. And, you know, to your point, the school board can make determinations that exceed state standards.
That's right. They can.
But
do they? Right. And this is why, you know, not to plug my report, but it's 5 or 6 pages that lays out what every state is requiring kids to know. And if your state got a D or an F, you know, you can look at it and say, okay, this is our state doesn't mention the founding fathers, for instance. Our state doesn't mention that kids need to know what the Bill of Rights say or the 14th Amendment. I mean, it's that specific. So if your state is not doing those things, it means that probably your local district is not doing that much better of a job, unless, like we said, you've got a really, you know, fine superintendent or great training for teachers, and they're able to learn this stuff on their own and adopt high quality curriculum. But the fact of the matter is that the civics, especially, most states don't even require a semester of civics or 1 full year of U.S. history. I mean, it's absurd. And some
that's pathetic.
I mean, a graduation requirement.
Yeah, that's pathetic. Really, just, and so disappointing. And what are these people doing? And I want to know, like, when was because it was on there. It used to be, right? We know for sure the standards used to hold, hey, you got to teach U.S. history because we're American, and you should teach civics because we need an engaged population. And then one day, somebody came over and said, hey, I think we should just take those things off the state standards. And everybody else said, yeah, that's fine. Looks good to me. Why would we want them on there? There's something wrong. There's something wrong with that.
Right. And what happens too is that, you know, I mean, I'm a former high school teacher. So what gets tested does get taught, like it or not. And so if these things no longer have, you know, an end of course test or a state standardized test, and I get that some people are very unhappy with testing kids, but if you don't do that, you just have no measure. You know, just we all get our annual physical, you know, once a year. We've got to know where kids are. And so, you know, in some cases, reading and math, don't get me wrong, reading and math are critical. But in some cases, what happened is we doubled down on taking, you know, double the amount of reading and math, and then, you know, history and civics sort of got, you know, lost.
No, hold on. I'm not going to let you do that, Amber. You know darn well they didn't double reading and math. They injected other things that have taken the place of civics and American history. And now they're going to go back to American history with the 1619 project, which is non-history. It's anti-history. And, you know, there's an agenda afoot. Not that everybody subscribes to that agenda, but there is a driving force. And that's the force that ages ago said, hey, why are we insisting that we teach American history and civics? Let's just take that off of our state standards. And those people are long gone probably, but there needs to be some accountability, and parents need to get involved, and they need to take this all the way up to their departments of education, their state departments of education. So tell me this, where can people go? First of all, I would like to see parents go into a board meeting and quiz your board members on their knowledge of U.S. history. And then say, I require that any teacher who teaches U.S. history should take the you called it the NAEP, the National Academic, whatever. They should take the test first in a closed system, so they can't just go look up all the answers. Once they take that test, and if they display, let's say, because their teaching proficiency isn't good enough, let's say they should display a 95% on the exam to allow for some misunderstandings, or, you know, they goofed up and they, you know, put the wrong answer when they knew the right answer or whatever. But they should be able to pass the damn test.
Right. Well, I'll even give you one better. Just take the citizenship test. online, you're not going to find the NAEP because they're not going to let adults see the answers, the questions to that test, but you can easily find different versions of the naturalization test that we give, legal immigrants before they become legal. And that one, many adults can't pass that one either.
Why wouldn't they disclose the test to adults? What's that about?
Just because then it costs a lot of money to develop these test questions, and they can't compromise the content of the test questions. So,
but they redo the test every 4 years, right?
No, they don't. They just churn up. They've got a test bank with all the test questions, and they pull different questions every 4 years. So that they don't want to have to redevelop new questions every 4 years. Anyway, that's getting in the weeds of.
I know, but I really like that. Like, I really like the idea that parents get engaged enough to insist that their teachers display an adequate level of proficiency in order to teach their children, right? We interview plumbers, we interview babysitters, we interview people before we hire them to provide services, and we don't interview teachers. We just say, well, the schools know what they're doing. And I'm just saying, here's another testament to the schools maybe don't know what they're doing. And maybe the states don't know what they're doing either. What is the best state? Do we have that according to this teaching civics and U.S. history standards?
A mix. Our A states were Alabama, California, the District of Columbia, Massachusetts, and Tennessee, right and left. And what did they do right? They actually were specific. And here's the other thing. A lot of states don't amp up the rigor until middle or high school. So elementary school, these kids are learning about, the flag and patriotic symbols. That's all well and good. But kids in the kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth grade, they're certainly old enough to begin to get exposure to the founding fathers, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution. Like, we're dumbing down what we're teaching kids in the elementary and middle grades, and often waiting until they get to high school to introduce them to real content. And that is such a missed opportunity, one in which other countries, by the way, do not do. And so we need to, again, introduce that rigor early and not think that kids aren't sort of developmentally far enough along to handle rigorous content.
Would you say that over the past several decades, we have infantilized our youth?
I mean, we don't have a lot of good, I head research. We don't have a lot of really good research on the decline of what we've expected kids to know. There's definitely some good research in reading that says that, if you teach phonics and, and phonemic awareness, that kids are going to learn reading a lot quicker and a lot better. And so when we do things like, whole language or discovery approaches, we definitely do dumb down how kids learn, and they can learn a lot quicker if we adopt certain approaches. So absolutely, I agree with that.
All right. That's my last question. We've run out of time. Amber Northern, sorry. Is there a website where people can go get some of this information?
Go to FordhamInstitute.org. You're going to see the report right on our homepage, and then click on your state and download your 5 or 6 page report. If your state didn't get an A or a B, go to your local school board meeting and say, why aren't we teaching X, Y, and Z? Because it's not in there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the program. This is the Sam Sorbo Show. Stay tuned for more on podcast and radio. And if you're watching on video, look for another video. Thanks for watching. I'm Sam Sorbo. Hi, folks. Sam Sorbo here. Are you tired of seeing all of America's resources being drained away? I know that I'm kind of fed up, and I think the time for talking is over, and it's time that we took action to try to save this country. And there is one little thing that you can do. We saw our friends and families, jobs and businesses sort of wither on the vine, while America's huge corporations had a financial windfall this past year. That doesn't sound fair to me. That doesn't seem right. I think it's time that we put our money where our conservative values are. Are you happy that you're funding corporations that donate to Planned Parenthood? I'm not. I have found an outlet and I want to share that with you. So email me at buyusmade@protonmail.com. Buy, B-U-Y, usmade@protonmail.com. Just email and I'll give you some more information. But it's time that we started to make our dollars speak for us. Thanks for listening. This is the Sam Sorbo Show.